very much. Thank you. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. Let me thank all the folks at Grassroots who worked so hard to make this evening possible, and to the kind folks who run the Jewish Community Center here for opening up their doors, especially the Holocaust Memorial Museum. I do think the name of the Holocaust Memorial Museum needs to have something added to it. I think it should also be called the Learning Center. There are many lessons to be learned when you walk through that museum and the exhibits, and you can't help but ask the question, why and how could something like this happen? Well, there's a formula for making genocides possible. I would hope that all of you were able to pick up this little brochure tonight, because there's a genocide chart inside that details the 8 major genocides since the turn of the century. And you'll notice that they all have something in common. You know, sometimes I kid and say that many of these dictators who perpetuate these genocides go to dictator school, because they all seem to have the same format, regardless of what the ethnic or racial background is of the genocide. Let's start with the number one ingredient that is absolutely necessary to have a genocide. You have to have a government that has gone bad, a government that is committed to hatred. That government then has to target a group of people that they hate, that they don't like, that they want dead. Then that government needs help. They need help from the organized mass media. And what help can the media offer? They can help demonize this targeted group of people. They can twist public opinion so that people will say when these folks are murdered, they had it coming. Who cares? You know, in Turkey, they said, oh, just a bunch of Armenians, who cares? In Nazi-occupied Europe, it was always a bunch of Jews, there was a bunch of Poles, who cares? In Stalin's Russia, it was a bunch of peasant farmers, well, who cares? And on and on and on. But then there's another ingredient that has to be added to this formula to make the genocide successful. And every dictator knows this. Every hate monger and bigot knows it. And that is that your targeted group that you've demonized must be disarmed. Jackbooted thugs and goons don't like being shot at. Dictators don't like being sniped at. Hate mongers and bigots don't like people standing up to them and saying, no, you will not perpetuate your vicious and brutal crimes. And that's the formula. So if there's any wannabe dictators in the room, this is what you have to do, step by step, to achieve your goal. There are some people in this room tonight, and certainly plenty of people throughout America, who would say, well, this is all ancient history. You're talking about Armenians, and you're talking about folks in the Soviet Union and in China and Uganda, and even in a couple of years ago in Rwanda. But it couldn't happen here. I mean, after all, we're theoretically a nation of laws and a Bill of Rights and a Constitution and high moral character. And there's some people who actually believe all that. And they want everyone in this room to believe that too. But I think it would be instructive to share with you a walk through the pages of history of the United States government. And let me share a few examples with you. And I want you to share these examples with people who say, oh, it couldn't happen here. We're too civilized. Let us start in 1932. Surely some of you remember or have heard about the bonus marchers. World War I U.S. veterans, American Army veterans, during the Depression, marched on Washington. They were like all other Americans, losing their homes, their farms, their kids were going hungry. And they pleaded with the government to pay them, if not the entire bonus of $1,000 that was promised to them if they were alive in 1945, but at least a partial payment. Herbert Hoover said, no, we can't do that. He said, I can give you some food and I can give you some medical attention. And most of these folks brought their families with them. They were camped out in open fields and in makeshift tents and shacks in the city of Washington, D.C. At some point, some of the local landlords in the city said, we have to move these squatters. We can't have them around here. They're depressing property values. And Herbert Hoover, to his credit, told the Army to simply move them away into another part of the city. But instead, certain Army personnel by the name of Douglas MacArthur, George Patton, Dwight Eisenhower, then all majors, disobeyed orders. Direct order from the President of the United States. And they moved the bonus marchers, all right, but they moved them with tanks and tear gas and charged them with sabers. And the Washington, D.C. police killed 2 or 3 of the bonus marchers. And there are people who will say, well, it couldn't happen in America. In 1942, the United States government, again showing how benevolent it is and how much respect it has for the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, rounded up 120,000 Japanese Americans on the western coast of this country. Approximately 70% of them were U.S. citizens. Not aliens, but U.S. citizens. And they were told, well, for your protection, we're going to put you in a detention camp. And these folks lost their homes, their businesses, and the Congress and the Supreme Court agreed that this was perfectly legal to do. One of the attorneys in one of the detention camps, I believe it was Manzanar, said, if we're in these camps for our protection, how come the machine guns are pointed in at us? Great observation. And again, there are people who say, well, this is America, things like this couldn't happen. This only happens in these foreign countries. The very same government who put these U.S. citizens in concentration camps when approached by some of the Jewish leaders during World War II to bomb the rail lines going to the murder camp at Auschwitz, Poland, were told, no, we can't divert a single bomb or a single airplane to go bomb some rail lines going to a murder camp. Don't bother us. Here you have an example of the U.S. government aiding and abetting mass murders, the Nazis. Thank you. But then state governments decided to show how dishonest they could be. In 1967, in New York City, the city of New York started registering gun owners who had certain types of rifles, semi-automatic rifles, in 1967. In 1992, they sent the police around to confiscate those rifles. Unless you remove the rifle from the city of New York, they were going to confiscate it. Never mind all of the data and all of the research and all of the studies that show that rifles in the hands of law-abiding citizens are not a threat to the police or to the general public. The truth is not important. To quote Susan Estrich in her radio program in Los Angeles, She told a caller, well, you're arguing facts, but I'm arguing politics. In 1968 in this country, again, the U.S. government showed how trustworthy it was. The 1968 Gun Control Act was passed after the Kennedy assassinations, after the Watts riots. And of course, the spin on it was, well, this is for the benefit of society, and we want to make sure that we can't have cheap mail-order guns and all kinds of excuses. What the U.S. government didn't tell the people in America and has never owned up to is simply this. And we've documented in our book, Gun Control Gateway to Tyranny, is that the author of the 68 Gun Control Act, the late Senator Thomas Dodd of Connecticut, asked the Library of Congress to translate the Nazi weapons law of 1938 and use that as the model for the 68 Gun Control Act. And the evidence of that is in the back of the book. There's a letter in there from law librarian Lewis Coffin to Senator Thomas Dodd, telling him, dear Senator Dodd, we are returning to you the copy of the German weapons law of 1938 you provided to us for translation. And when you look at the two laws side by side, as we've done in this book, and you look at all the parallels, it's obvious that the U.S. government not only is not willing to bomb rail lines going to Nazi murder camps, but they're willing to use Nazi weapons laws as a model for America's gun control laws. And there are people who say, well, you know, these things can't happen in America. And if we go back a few years before 1968, it was the U.S. government that brought Nazi war criminals into America, made sure they were never prosecuted, to help set up the CIA. Then you have people from the CIA like Edwin Wells, who helped set up Handgun Control Incorporated. And this is the government that's telling you and urging other countries to disarm the citizenry because the people can trust the government. We're here to help you. We feel your pain, and we got to do it for the kids. One can only speculate on what kind of pain they don't want to feel from an armed citizenry. Presently in America, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is doing what the Nazis did, what the communists have done, and what other genocidal regimes have done, and that's register firearms. How many of you realize that about 50% of the firearms dealers in this country have gone out of business in the last several years, and that those records from those firearms dealers were turned into the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and they're computerizing them. And they brag openly that, by the way, it's against the law for them to do this, but what's the law to people who know better, who feel your pain and all this? They've computerized over 60 million firearms, and of course the people who owned them, or they were sold to. Why would the U.S. government want to do the same thing that's been done in other countries that have been, at the very least, police states? Why do they now want to do that in America? I mean, do they really think they're going to make the streets safer when criminals don't buy guns in stores and steal them by registering law-abiding citizens? Why indeed? Another example of the U.S. government and its benevolence towards its citizens. How many of you remember 1970, Kent State? You know, here you have people exercising their First Amendment rights, protesting American troops going into Cambodia, and the police are not concerned about what these folks are doing, but the government sends in the National Guard, and someone loses their ability to judge the situation, and they open fire, and you have dead students. Of course, all of us are familiar with some of the major tragedies that have gotten a lot of publicity in this country. You know, Waco, Ruby Ridge. There's new evidence coming out about Waco, if it's true, and if it's to be believed. There are military experts now saying that according to infrared radar techniques, it's entirely possible that after the U.S. government thugs tear gassed and then started to burn these people alive when they were trying to escape, they were machine gunned to death. So there wouldn't be any witnesses. But there are people saying, well, this is America, things like that don't happen here, and we don't have to worry, and we should give up all our guns because we can trust the government. What government are these people talking about? You know, also in '93, the Ruby Ridge incident. Here you have a setup where someone, BATF tries to set an individual up because they want him to sell a shotgun that has a barrel that's a quarter of an inch too short. And the end result is they won't do it, and they send 400 armed agents after some guy and his family up in a little shack in the woods of Idaho, and proudly brag about murdering his wife when she comes to the door holding an assault baby in her arms. Well, that FBI sniper must have been shaking in his boots when Vicki Weaver stood there with a baby in her arms. He must have really felt threatened. And that government criminal, Lon Horiachi, is still on the payroll, and you're paying his salary. Pardon me? He got a raise. And a promotion. Doesn't that make you feel proud of your country? Pardon me?
He was responsible for the machine guns in Waco.
Nice guy. We need more people like him as government employees. The U.S. Customs in 1992 also broke into someone's home. They actually set a bomb off in the person's backyard, crashed their way into the house, and while the person's defending themselves with a gun, they shoot him 3 times. And then when they have him face down on the carpet, they shoot him in the back with handcuffs on. Government goons at work again in America. You know, to some of you this might seem like petty tyrannies, but these are the kind of petty tyrannies that set the foundation for mass murder, because you start to get people accustomed to government thuggery, to government criminals having their way, and the media goes along with it, and the media promotes it. And the media sets itself up as the third estate in America, and fourth estate as they call themselves, and they say, it's just fine that these people are getting shot and blown away. There must have been something wrong with them. I think one of the most fascinating things that's come out to show you the mindset of how successful the government has been in warping people's minds, how successful the U.S. media has been in promoting their agenda, is in 1994, a Lieutenant Commander Cunningham, some of you know this story, some of you may not, was working on his doctoral thesis in the military, and he went to a place called 29 Palms, a Marine Corps base in California. And he was doing a study about military attitudes and if you would work for the United Nations and other things of interest in the military. And One of the questions he asked towards the end was if the U.S. government gave orders to shoot Americans who would not turn in their guns, would you shoot Americans? Well, do you know that 39% of these Marines answered yes, or, well, we're not sure, but maybe? Now, that should frighten everyone. That there are people in the U.S. military who have access to tanks and missiles and bomber planes and whatever else they have. And 39% of these folks in the Marine Corps in that particular unit are saying, yeah, we'll kill Americans. Never mind that it's an unconstitutional order. No one raised that issue at all. So we have 61% of the people in that division saying, well, no, we won't shoot Americans, and 39% saying yes. And if Americans don't start waking up other Americans, that 39% figure is going to be 45%, then 50%, then 60%. But again, there are people who say, well, you know, we don't need guns. You can trust the police and the military. They're the only ones that should have guns. And again, I have to ask the question of someone like that. Are they serious about keeping America free? Do they even have a clue about what America is all about? Briefly, let me share something with you that every American needs to understand when they say only the police need guns. We have a little report. I think we brought some extra copies along tonight. They're free, called Dial 911 and Die. You have to understand the law of the land in America. No U.S. citizen has a right to police protection. Here's the law. We've outlined it in here for you. The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals 7th District has ruled very clearly that the government is not responsible for protecting you. You're on your own. It's important that you get a hold of this brochure tonight and share it with others so that people understand why the American people need guns and why the American people are going to keep their guns. And why real Americans are not going to tolerate tyranny or a government gone bad that would murder people in this country. I think it's instructive, since we're in a setting at the Jewish Community Center here, that we remind people that in 1994 there was a book published called The Secret War Against the Jews. And this book by former Justice Department Attorney John Loftus and Mark Ahrens details how the U.S. government spies on Jews, including Jewish children playing in sandboxes at day camps. It's also important to understand in this book that the U.S. government and Great Britain have a gentleman's agreement. The British send people over here to spy on Americans, and we send people over to England to spy on the British. And when U.S. officials go before Congress in case they're accused of spying on Americans, they say, no, we're not doing that. They don't tell the Congress the British are doing it. But again, this is a country where people say, well, these things can't happen here. And, we don't need our guns. This is indeed a country where the government has gone bad. This is indeed a country where the American people must stay armed. And those who would disagree, I think, fall into two camps: the hopelessly naive and those who perhaps are part of a broader and very nasty agenda that is not in the best interest of your freedom or that of your loved ones. I'm going to try something new tonight. I've never done this before. But as I was looking through a a book, I came across some words to a song. I don't sing, and you're lucky I'm not going to try to sing to you. But I want to share just some of the words with you because it sums up the American ideal and it sums up the state of affairs in America. The song is called Do You Hear the People Sing? It's from Les Miserables, the world's most popular musical. It's about the French Revolution. Let me just read a few of the words to you in closing. It says, do you hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men? It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart echoes the beating of the drums, there is a life about to start when tomorrow comes. Will you join in our crusade? Who will be strong and stand with me? Beyond the barricade, is there a world you long to see? Then join in the fight that will give you the right to be free. Do you hear the people singing the song of angry men? It is the music of people who will not be slaves again. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.